Hello, I'm Dale Yurton, and welcome to a brand new study I want to share with you from the life of Moses. We're going to look at Exodus, the 17th chapter, and see how that Moses had to transition or change the way that he led to be able to get the people to the promised land. I'm calling these three lessons I'm going to share maximizing ministry or reaching our potential for God. This is how that God teaches Moses to improve or to continue to grow in his leadership style. Exodus, the 17th chapter, and verse 2. Therefore the people contended with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." So Moses said to them, "Why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord?" Now, what's happening here is it's what we call a with the people style of leadership, because Moses has to be with the people for them to be able to quarrel with him. And that's the key word that is used there in verse 2. They contended with Moses. And so he is with the people and they are quarreling with him. Now, what I've discovered over the years in leadership in the church is most churches stop growing because the ministry stops growing. It's very basic, but if we as leaders do not continue to grow spiritually, then our people will either outgrow us and leave us, or they become the leaders. Everything in life is this way. It rises or falls with leadership. Leadership is going to determine whether it is a good home, a good family, if it is a good job, if it's a good church, if it's a good community or a nation. Everything rises and falls with leadership. Now, one of the basic facts of life is, if something is alive, if it's growing, it will be changing. I use an illustration here of the silkworm that's a little caterpillar that's growing from just being a worm, going into the cocoon that becomes the beautiful butterfly. Now that is what a process they call metamorphosis, that it's changing inwardly. The same is true with leadership. And that's what Moses discovers in his style of leadership. This first lesson, I want to focus on what I'm going to call with the people. With the people. Now, this is not bad at all. In fact, this is where every ministry begins. It all starts with a dream in the heart of the leader. God touches somebody's heart, and it doesn't matter whether it's man or woman, male or female. No, anyone that God calls into a leadership position, he gives them a vision or a dream. They capture this picture of the way things could be or ought to be. Every group is this way. Every group starts small, sharing a common interest. That's the way families are born. A couple that is attracted to each other, and then they make a covenant of love, and out of that covenant of love, babies are born. And then it begins growing until what we call the exponential family, the family that has expanded. I remember my mother and father-in-law that they were married for 62 years before he passed away, and during that time, they went from just the two of them to 7 children to 15 grandchildren to 35 great-grandchildren. Do you see what's happening? The family is growing. It is expanding. But it always starts small. So this is what I would term this a family style of leadership. That's where Moses is. He's with the people. It's a family style, and as a family style, the leader is like daddy to the group. and the family is growing around him, and they begin to multiply when they get, into the next generations. You always start out with addition, but then it goes into multiplication. That's what we see in every group, and that's what's happened for Moses. Now, in this first style of leadership, the family style, the emphasis is on love. Love. Because these are babies that you're dealing with, immature people, and the first thing that they must be assured of is your love. And so the daddy is loving the children, loving the babies. It's a wonderful time of ministry. There's nothing wrong with this at all. It's where it should begin. In this wonderful stage of life, and I can remember it so well in my life, both with my children and then 25 years later with my grandchildren. The leaders come down to the children's level and they begin to play games with them. Particularly, the mothers love to talk baby talk to the babies. And they're just talking to them, communicating on their level. The daddies, I can remember getting down in the floor and playing games with them. Oh, one of the games they loved to play was what they would call a piggy ride. I don't know where they got that idea, but I guess because I was fat or something. But they loved to climb on my back, and I would crawl across the floor with them riding on my back and them laughing hysterically. It's a wonderful time. The same is true with ministry. Ministry. See, at this stage of children's life, they learn best by playing. If something's fun, if it makes them laugh, then they're actually getting an education. And it's the best way for them to learn. So there is nothing wrong with this. This is where all ministry begins. It's what one brother described this. He said this is a hands-on ministry. This is where you're touching them. You're communicating love to them. You're building relationships with them. So a hands-on ministry, or we could call them working hands. You certainly will get your hands dirty working and providing all the things that have to be done to take care of the babies. What a wonderful time and style of leadership. And this is where Moses is with the people. With the people. And it's at this point, really, and if we don't get this right, nothing else is going to be right in leadership. It's with the people where you're building relationships. Now, this is one of the difficult things that I see when, for instance, if someone goes into a community and they start a church, they plant a church, they birth that, then they're the daddy from the beginning. But what happens when a church has been established for a period of time and you're brought in as a young minister to take the place of some beloved pastor that founded that work, and now you're coming in? That's a totally different relationship. And that's part of what Moses is dealing with. Because if you don't have the relationships where they trust you, they know that you love them. Boy, I discovered that, God bringing my family and I in to take leadership in a troubled church. They had gone through a major division and they didn't trust anybody. And it took time. It took time for me to be able to build the relationship where they would trust me. I can remember one day a dear brother saying to me, "I know you haven't done anything yet, Pastor, but I'm just watching you." And he was honest enough to confess what so many in the congregation were doing. What did I have to do? Build the relationship. And you do that by loving them, by coming on their level and reassuring them of the love of God. Many times I would tell them, I know that God loves you because he put love in my heart for you. So it's at this stage the church becomes what I will call it a covenant community. A covenant community. And this is why God gives babies to families. I know there are those that move outside the rules of God, but I've never seen children raised in an orphanage that didn't struggle emotionally. They had problems that would have automatically been taken care of if they had been a part of a loving family. The church is supposed to be that. It's to begin. You've got to build the relationships where everybody knows that they are loved, that they are cared for. And when we as a leader, and this is what Moses is struggling with these people because they've been slaves. The only kind of leadership they have known has been bad leadership, harsh leadership. It's one of the difficult things when you see people that have gone through a divorce and remarriage situation, and the previous marriage obviously wasn't that strong, wasn't that good, or it would have remained. But because of problems, they divided, and then they bring those hurts and injuries into the next relationships. And so it takes time to heal that. That's where Moses is. He's dealing with a group of people that have been abused all their lives. It's all they've ever known is the life of slavery. Now they've come into liberty. They're in the wilderness on the way to the promised land, but they don't trust Moses. So when they get into a situation where there's no water to drink, they resort back to the same thing that they did as slaves, that is, complain. So they're complaining, and then he said they contended with him. They're blaming him for their problem. You brought us out in this wilderness to die. That was the mindset of a slave, and that's what they were accusing him of being a bad leader. Now, see, here's what the leader has to recognize. To realize this is a normal process in life. You must understand, this is not heaven. No, we have not arrived. We're going through a process in an imperfect world with imperfect people, many of them that are suffering from many wounds and hurts. And we've got to heal them up of those things. So as a leader, the answer to the problem that Moses has, he must now start changing the way that he led. Just like everything changes with time, and I get the picture there of the butterfly and the cocoons. The stage before that would be the caterpillar. And so each stage, it's the same life, but it looks differently. There's changes, a different emphasis, different results. And leadership has got to do this. As a leader, as Moses, he's got to change the way that he is leading. Because, yes, God gives families babies, but the babies begin growing up. The babies start getting big, and soon they're walking and talking, and they discover their own will. And from that point on, it's a contest of wills. The babies grow up, and they become children. The children grow up to become young adults. See, it's a process, but everything that has life in it is going to grow. There's going to be changes. And if we as leaders do not change the way that we are leading, we're soon going to find the people contending with us, blaming us for their unhappiness, blaming us for the problems that they are facing in life, and say, it's your fault. You're the one that brought us here in the first place. That's what's happening in Moses' life. So Moses is going to have to learn how to be a different kind of leader. He's going to have to change his style of leadership to be able to get these people to the promised land. Now, how do you know when you've stayed in one style of leadership for too long? The people will let you know. Yes, they'll begin to voice their complaints. That's one of the things I've discovered about people. Whether or not you have congregational style of leadership where the people vote and give their opinions on things, or if you as a leader make those decisions. But they will vote. They'll vote with their wallets. They vote with their shoes. That's right. They're always going to let you know if they're happy, if they like your style of leadership. That's what's happening with Moses. We know we stayed too long with the people when they begin to strive with us. They begin to contend or argue with us. I can remember telling my wife one day, we have two daughters, and both beautiful young ladies and intelligent. And I remember telling him as these girls became teenagers, I said, honey, you know what's wrong with these girls? I said, ever since they've been babies, we've loved on them and we've told them how smart they are. And they've grown up believing us. Now they think they're smarter than we are. It always amazes me. I've been involved in ministry so many years, and I'll meet people, that they've never pastored a church, they've never preached a sermon, and yet they think they know more about the Bible than I do. And I have studied all my life. That always amazes me, that people do that. But that's human nature. So this is what's happening. The people are blaming Moses for their problems and saying, why did you bring us out here to die? What's the answer? God's answer to Moses was, you need to change the way you are leading. You've got to do the same thing in a different way. It's time for you to change your leadership style. And so we see, when we go back to the text in Exodus, the 17th chapter, in verse 5, it said, the Lord said to Moses, go on before the people. Now note that. Before, the word was with the people. Now he's saying, go before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river and go. This is the answer. I see so many people make this mistake. If we continue doing things in the same way, we should expect the same results. I mean, I remember hearing one brother put it this way. He said, it's a form of insanity to continue doing the same things but expecting different results. I have to say, you're right. That is so true. We've got to change the way that we do things, from being with the people to going before the people. Now, the truth is, every level of leadership becomes a little bit more lonely. Why? Because fewer and fewer people ascend to that type of leadership. They're just, some people are not able to do it. Others will not pay the price to do it. But I caution you that on every level of leadership, that wherever God sends you, never go to the next level of leadership alone. Take some of the elders with you. We don't know exactly how many there was. I would say there was at least one that represented every tribe, so that would be at least 12 men that are going with Moses. But the word is plural there. Take somebody with you. Never go there alone. And then personally, as a leader, what you have to learn to do is to compensate for this loneliness by spending more time in the presence of God. That's right. You will have to spend more time praying. I remember one of the statements that they quote Martin Luther as saying, he said, I've got so many things to do today. I'm going to have to spend at least 3 hours in prayer to be able to get it all done. You learn to compensate your loneliness by spending more time in God's presence. Now, when we discover these truths, that we've got to change the way that we lead. It doesn't mean that we become a different person or even a different kind of person. It just simply means we've got to change our methods. We have to go from being with the people to going before the people. I've been asked the question many times, how do you teach people? You got to know at least one thing they don't know, and you go tell them. That's how you become a leader. You've got to be at least one step ahead. You have to. Otherwise, you cease being the leader. I remember I was in Russia when I first heard this parable where they said, if you want to go fast, go alone. Boy, there's a lot of truth in that, and it's one of the regrets that I have at this stage of my life. As a young leader, I did this too much. I went alone because I wanted to go fast. I was determined to do as much as I possibly could do, so I was going as fast as I could. In fact, I have an associate pastor that said to me one day, and he had served faithfully with me for over 8 years, and he said to me, he said, oh man, back then when you were young, he said, we were all just trying to stay up with you, to keep up with you. I didn't realize that as a young leader. I was just 100% for Jesus, giving it everything that I had. But the problem is, going alone doesn't influence anybody else. Going it alone, Jesus didn't do that. He was always taking someone with him. The Apostle Paul did not do that. Paul was always building a team around him. So the Russian proverb goes like this: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, then take someone with you. That's what Moses is having to discover. Now, this is not easy. It requires a mental shift in the mind of the leader. You have to let the baby cry for a while. You're training the baby how to be a child and feed themselves. You have to allow people to voice their displeasure without taking it personal and thinking, I'm a very bad leader. No, you intentionally begin walking them through these decisions, showing them the things that they are to do, teaching them the ways of God. And if we don't do that, we end up with a church filled with crying babies, immature people that cannot care for themselves, let alone lead someone else to Christ. Now, I understand there are some people that, because of their energy, their intelligence, their giftings, they are willing to, they're what we call self-motivators or self-starters. They have that energy on the inside of them. But most people are not that way. Most people have to be taught, trained, equipped. And so we've got to find ways to be able to teach these people about God, to show them about God, to show them the ways of God. It's our responsibility. Remember, I started with the thought, everything rises or falls with leadership. It's the main reason that so many churches stop growing, is because the leadership doesn't grow. The leadership is not learning anything new. We're simply repeating the past over and over and over again. What a mistake. What a tragedy. Life's a journey, and we're supposed to be going somewhere. And yet, I'm afraid that there are too many people that are stuck in one style of leadership, and so the church is stuck with them. The church cannot grow, and they wonder why so many young people leave their churches, why they're going somewhere else. It's because they think they're going somewhere, and they don't believe we are. That's one of the main reasons they stop coming to church. And so it's more than just a statement. It's really true. Churches remain small because they think small. Now, I'm not saying that bigger is always better. No, I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying anything that has life in it will be growing. Maybe it's not growing numerically, but it's growing in resources. It may not be growing in resources, but they're growing in knowledge. They're growing in spiritual maturity. They're growing in their kingdom influence, the way they are able to affect other people's lives, because everything that has life within it will change. There will be changes, and they're adapting to that to be able to maximize their ministry, to fulfill their destiny, to reach their potential for God. And so I challenge you, whatever situation that you find yourself in, these principles apply. These principles work in the secular world just like they do in the spiritual world. They work in the community just like they do in the family, in the church. And so God help us being put into positions where we are responsible for other people's lives to keep growing as leaders. And that's what God says to Moses. It's not enough for you to pray about this and say, what am I going to do? You've got to change the way that you lead, your style of leadership. And when Moses does that, God begins to bless the people in a completely new way. We're going to look at that in the next lesson. So the first thing that I want you to learn is we all start here. Everything starts small. That's the way our life began, just one single cell. But that one single cell started multiplying, and then you can see the result today. There's been a lot of multiplication of cells, and now there are millions of cells in our bodies because we never stopped growing. And so I challenge you, learn to continue growing in your leadership style. Reach your potential for God. Be everything that God created you to be. And then one day you're going to hear Jesus say, well done, good and faithful servant. Those are the words I'm living to hear.